Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, and this is Seema. And today's contract tip is a follow-up to a previous video that I have done. The previous video is the more competitive buyer's offer with right to inspect rather than due diligence. And I will link that video below. But there have been some questions that have come up with that GAR form, and I just wanted to cover those just briefly as a follow-up. So please go watch that other video for an explanation of what the exhibit is and what a buyer's right is if they go binding with a seller with a right to inspect and then an amendment to remove the inspection contingency rather than a due diligence period. And the previous video talks about how that might be more competitive, might make the buyer's offer more competitive than a buyer who has an offer with a due diligence period. But I just wanted to clarify a little bit about that exhibit because this has come up. So the exhibit does state, Seema's very interested. Okay, baby. The exhibit states, hang on and I will find it. The exhibit is GAR, Georgia Association of Realtors, F273, and it's called Property Sold with Right to Request Repairs. And again, this would be used in place of due diligence, not with due diligence. And basically, what it is, it says that the buyer shall have the right to request the seller repair and or replace defects, if any, in the property identified by the buyer's inspector in a written report. Within X number of days from the binding agreement date, buyer shall provide seller with a signed written amendment to the agreement requesting the defects to be repaired and or replaced, and B, a copy of all reports of inspectors describing those defects. If a buyer does not timely present the written amendment and inspector's report, buyer shall be deemed to have accepted the property as is. But further on in this exhibit, it goes on about, in paragraph number 2, it talks about the process, the notices, and the time frames under which a buyer must submit the amendment to the seller to address these repairs. A couple of things I want to point out to you. Number one, it specifically talks about that the buyer and the seller have the opportunity to negotiate defects to be repaired and replaced. So before I go on, let me go on to remind you that further on in this exhibit under paragraph 5B, it specifically defines what defects are. So you want to read through that. It is not an amendment. This would not be used to negotiate through cosmetic items to be replaced, but it does specifically talk about defects, which would be things like infestation by termites or any condition of a building product, if there is something that creates a significant health risk, a violation of laws or codes or regulations, or at the present time not in good working order and repair. Again, read through that paragraph. So that's the first thing I want to bring to your attention, is it is specifically for the buyer and the seller to negotiate through defects. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is in this exhibit, there is no mention of, it talks about termination, it talks about the buyer's opportunity to continue on accepting the property as is, or the buyer's right to terminate within the notices and the time frames of this exhibit. But it does not specifically mention earnest money. So as a broker, my interpretation would be the implication is that if a buyer does terminate based on this within the time frame, sending the proper notices, so forth and so on, they would get their earnest money back. However, another broker might not make that interpretation, and that is not spelled out. So, as an agent on both sides of the transaction, Protect your clients and do not leave anything up to anyone's specific interpretation. In other words, if you have a buyer or if you are a seller and you receive a contract, not with the due diligence period, but with the property sold with the right to request repairs, the very end of paragraph 2 talks about, as I mentioned, the opportunity to negotiate through the seller repairing these defective items. And then it states all parties shall promptly execute an amendment to the agreement reflecting the accepted offer or counteroffer. And that amendment is F722 GAR, Georgia Association of Realtors F722, amendment to remove inspection contingency. Again, not to be used with the due diligence period, but to be used with this exhibit. Then back to the exhibit, it goes on to say, if neither party timely accepts the other party's last offer or counteroffer, or the buyer does not elect to buy the property as is, this agreement shall terminate. Again, no mention of the refund of earnest money. So what I suggest as a broker that you do is you write a special stipulation into your purchase and sale agreement that says, with respect or per paragraph number 2 of property sold with right to request repairs exhibit, should agreement terminate, all earnest money to be refunded to buyer. So again, I suggest do not leave it up to anyone's interpretation, whether that be a broker's interpretation or misleading expectation on behalf of your buyer or your seller, and specifically spell that out as a special stipulation. What happens to the buyer's earnest money should the contract terminate if the buyer chooses to do so, if they do not come to a resolution during the defect resolution period? So take a look at that exhibit. Please watch the other video. I will link it below. And comment below. Have you used this exhibit? Are your buyers having luck with it? Are you finding that it is making your buyers more competitive, their offers more competitive in this market? So thank you guys so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.